At the beginning of each podcast episode, hosts will typically read an ad for another company, but we're going to take this opportunity to promote and plug what we're building. We are building an AI powered app that's going to be your personal mindset coach. Think about it as if you had a therapist in your pocket, one that'll help you get to know who you really are, process your emotions, and make sense of your thoughts. The app launch waitlist is back live and it's on our website. For convenience, we also left a link in the show notes. It's very simple. All you got to do is put your name and email address and you're signed up for the waitlist. So you'll be the first to know when we launch. And also you'll be the first to be able to actually test it. For now, here's a clip from this week's episode.
I'm like, how did I have that tenacity? Just like, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't care. Like, I'm like, I am just going to keep going at this and I'm going to figure this out. And it worked out because I was actually very fortunate enough while I was in this Art Students League in New York, doing odd jobs. I ended up stumbling into a job for Samsung marketing company. And then from there, that became like a whole different journey. And we'll talk about that. But I also managed to find myself an editor from DC Comics. She allowed me to be an intern there.
Mi gente, dímelo, what's good? Welcome to another episode of the Quién, Eres podcast, brought to you by Plural, where our mission is to redefine professionalism. Every week, we have a different guest join us for a very candid conversation around the conflict that they've experienced between professionalism and authenticity. Speaking of guests, the clip in the intro that you heard is with this week's guest, the homie Ivan. These days, he's the co-founder of Video Game Amateurs, but his professional background is extensive and interesting. He's done everything from data engineering to coding to events management and production, instructional design, and he's worked for some well-known companies, including Samsung and Microsoft. In this week's conversation, we talk about the wild story of how he went from college dropout to succeeding in big tech and then starting his own video game events company. And a dope part about this is that although he doesn't take a quote-unquote traditional path, he's gone on to do a lot of dope work. And I'm just excited to see his continued growth. That said, now that you know a little bit more about our guest, as well as this week's episode, let's get into this dope conversation.
All right, cool. So I always start the podcast with the word authenticity, right? Such a buzzword. You probably hear it all the time. But when you hear the word, what does it mean to you?
Yo, so it's so funny. I have been thinking about this ever since we had that last conversation. I think like about a week ago. I think right now, currently, authenticity to me feels just, I think like relentless, right? Or the sense of not really caring what other people think. And I know there is a word for that. But I think recently in my life, I think in my journey right now, authenticity really means to choose the path that feels right for you, or like who you are as a core.
Relentless. That's a powerful word, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's tenacity. It's like the word of it. I think that just comes from like, where I am right now in my life. And I keep, kind of like pushing into that. But no, yeah, I think authenticity, when we sit back and think about like about that level, like where we're, everyone's journey. And I keep mentioning about this journey is going to be really important. Being real to oneself. What does that involve? What does that look like? Right. Mm-hmm. Is there a level of relentlessness? Is there a bit of tenacity? Is there a bit of determination? Things that we don't necessarily give those buzzwords to like authenticity. I think that's something that I am now thinking, I'm aligning that myself with that.
Do you think growing up you were allowed to be tenacious?
No. I think that's where I think everything that I'm doing right now in my life is a reflection of what I wasn't able to do when I was growing up.
Yeah, interesting. Tell me more. Like, why weren't you allowed to be tenacious?
I think it's not that I think I know, and shouts to my family. I mean, I do struggle with just sort of thinking of like, hey, like they definitely helped me get to the place where I am now, right? And without their efforts, I wouldn't be to where I am. But I think I believe a lot of things that I wasn't able to do was a bit of them trying to like shield me from like, no, you don't necessarily have to do that. Like getting a job, for example. I think it's one, as someone being an immigrant of Dominican parents and a Dominican household.
De lo mío, ¿qué lo que?
They were always super They just wanted me to go to school. They wanted me to be, like, the doctor, lawyer, ingeniero, obviously, have to be one of those, right? And I kind of did follow that path, right? I try to, and even in high school, like I went to like a art majors class. I was actually really gifted in, well, I'd like to say I was gifted in art, but like I did have like a lot of like those opportunities to go to a good art college. But I opted to just stay in New York, mostly because my parents didn't really want me to leave anywhere, or even the fact of like, what's out there. You don't know what's out there.
Tell me about, because I think a lot of our family's wisdom or advice is often them trying to protect us. They care about us. Like,
yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about some of the fears that, just some of those conversations, like even the idea you said, like going to college, maybe there was an instance of like, maybe I do want to go away, but you were pulled to sort of stay.
Yeah, I was pulled to stay because obviously we all have like a fear of our parents to some degree, right?
Sure,
and we do trust them for our decisions. A lot of my decision making up until I was maybe like 16 to 17, it was very much my mom had a handle on like, hey, this is kind of like where you need to go, and my father mostly just looked in and said, okay, well, you look like you're doing okay. So,
and we also just don't want to disappoint them.
Right. And me being the first child between both my parents, I have actually two other brothers. To give you more context of that, it was my sister and myself that we grew up together. My sister was the second child, and she went through, and the reason why I'm saying this is because it does involve to the story. My sister was able to go to a kind of a preparatory school, like through like Oliver, I believe. And so, I didn't go actually. So I did apply to those, those programs that help, kids like ourselves, kids of color, get into these like affluent high schools and colleges. Was just never got selected. But my sister, I was like the test dummy for all these things. And then my sister was sort of like, okay, we learned from him. She was going to be all right. And, she did go through that, that trajectory, through that passion route. And shouts to her. I think she's also very gifted, and she's obviously super smart. But obviously you can see like the difference of like, we can see the parents, they also don't know really what they're doing in hindsight. It's I can see, you just sort of figured things out with me. But, I did listen to them as much as I can in terms of like figuring things out. But I've learned so much just on being like relentless and just feeling like, okay, I have something, right? Like I have a passion for something and I can't quite explain it. Only thing I know is that it's here. It's somewhere here, and I know I can't explain it, but I know I want to drive into it.
So what were some of those early passions that you kind of wanted to explore but were hesitant just because of these expectations that you thought you had to fit into?
Yeah.
I mentioned art earlier. I didn't know that was part of your passion.
Yeah, that was a journey. And I see that, and funny enough, I see my art through different passions of mine. And so the big one was when I went to high school. Obviously, I went through like an art program through I got accepted to a few art schools. Actually, funny enough, I first went to NYU for engineering and realized I actually don't want to do this. I couldn't quite fathom the idea of like sitting in a desk and just coding away for the rest of my life.
Wait, I thought you were following art, but then you're saying you followed engineering? Like when was
I ended up...
Oh, you put it aside to follow engineering.
I put aside to follow engineering, right.
So let's stop there though. Like why you have this passion and you like, I love this, but you're just like, let me go into engineering. And you could like both, but why the engineering?
Because I knew that was a safe bet. That I think was a safe bet. I think when we don't, and you're gonna get like an inner working of how I think of life. I said this is just a stepping stone. Engineering for me is just a stepping stone. And there's so many people who are just like, yo, this is like the end all be all. And I'm like, no, that's cute, that's great, but that's not necessarily where I see myself in. But the way I see like everything in this journey, or at least in like my journey, is like these are all acquirable skills. I had a really great mentor. Shouts to my mentor for this. He was like, keep your skills hot, and you'll always find a spot.
Bar.
Yeah, like absolutely. And with that, I knew going into the engineering school and taking some tools, figuring things out. Because at that point, I think I wanted to do game design. I was like, I think I want to do game development. I want to figure something out, but I want to be here. I want to kind of land. I want to land here. It may not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but I certainly want to build my passions and build my skill set that I can find the right people around me to be able to complete what my calling looks like, or at least what I believe myself to be. And I want to showcase that through my project and through my passions.
Was anybody like, did you grow up around engineers?
Nah. No, I did not grow up. I didn't grow up around any engineers. I think I had nobody. I had and that's a beauty of all my friends really say like you have some luck, you have some ridiculous luck to be able to like be in these spaces and be kind of like you just set your heart on something, you just kind of do it, which is why I think that's where my authenticity really comes from. I'm like, I don't know how that looks like, but I'm gonna figure it out. And we really don't give a lot of, we don't speak about that, like I call it like that hidden power of like that people have of just being able to like go forward to what your calling looks like, and what does that like, how do you enable that? Because I still don't feel like, even coming back into like the art, when I went to, after going to NYU, I left and actually went to Pratt. So I went to Pratt to do art, digital animation. Prior to that, I taught myself how to do macro, Flash, back in Newgrounds and all that stuff. So I made cartoon animations. And I still have a few. I'm sure they're somewhere like located in some archives at newgrounds.com. I got to find them. But I used to do animations, like stick figure stuff, those fighting ones, those things I used to do. I learned Blender, I learned 3D stuff. All those things, funny enough, I did into a portfolio. And it's so funny, I still don't believe myself to be like an artist sometimes. And there is that little like, I did all that. And I still went to engineering school, but then went back. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to complete Pratt just because it's too expensive.
And were you working at the time when you were in Pratt?
I ended up working selling lemonade. I remember that. Yeah.
Wait,
so
what?
Yeah. So I had a really interesting
like on the corner.
So so there used to be like a lemonade company that had like lemonade, and also like had another subsection of like milk too. So I would go to like different bodegas and like grocery stores like Aristides and all that stuff, and they'd be like just checking in, like, all right, how many do you have? All right, cool, everything good. 19-year-old, but like I just needed to make things work, right? Because I was so hyped for this. But yeah, I mean, after that, then I went to the Art Students League in New York in like 57th Street. I was there with a bunch of old people because I couldn't afford Pratt. So I was like, well, I'm going to figure this out. And so I told my parents one of the hardest truths was really my first avenue of being authentic with my parents. I was like, listen, I know you guys wanted ingeniero, but like, that's not here, right? Like, I don't feel like I have that. Yeah. I want to do art, but unfortunately it's too expensive. So I'm going to take a year. I'm just going to be in this house for a year. But I'm going to be working, but I'm going to be doing art. Yeah. Like, it's just, let's figure something out here. And that was like probably the first time my mom, it's funny, my mom did not want to tell anybody that I was a dropout, because that was crazy back in the day, right? It was like 10, 12 years ago. It was like, it's crazy.
You finished engineering school, but then...
No, I transferred to Pratt. So I went from NYU to Pratt my sophomore year. From there, I just couldn't afford it. I was like, wait, how much is this? I have no grants, no scholarships. I was like, well, I can only do one semester, huh?
Oh, I didn't know that you dropped out to go to Pratt.
Yeah.
Tell me, before even getting into like your mom's reaction, your family's reaction, how did you feel during that time? Because you also have colleagues, classmates, and you're seeing people pursue these things, and maybe you saw classmates that were still in engineering school and they're not doing that, but they're continuing with their path. And here you are sort of like diverging into your own, like, how did that feel? And then you finally making the decision to be like, nah, I want to do this. Because a lot of people don't make that decision until they're like 40,
That's yeah. I've never felt so alone, because it felt like I did something wrong. All of my friends and my close friends and the people who I grew up with are still in college. They're still in school, right? And that's all we've known. So they're doing that. My friends from Pratt are also like now pursuing it. But I was like, how do you guys afford it? Oh, because I have moms and dads who've had this money saved up, and like they want me to pursue it. And I'm like, dang. And so like here I am, like I can't even pursue what I love. Yeah. But I've learned enough to say, okay, if I still keep disciplined and I still keep achieving this, then I'm going to get to this point. So, it's even recent where I'm like, how did I have that tenacity? Just like, I didn't care. Yeah. I was just like, I don't care. Like, yeah. I am just going to keep going at this, and I'm going to figure this out. And it worked out, because I was actually very fortunate enough. While I was in this Art Students League of New York doing odd jobs, I ended up stumbling into a job for Samsung marketing company. And then from there, that became like a whole different journey, and we'll talk about that. But I also managed to find myself an editor from DC Comics. She allowed me to be an intern there. I learned what that looked like for all that. All my comics and stuff are because of DC before they actually moved their whole entire operations to Torrance, California. So, I mean, shout out to Cheryl, shout out to you, shout out to, that team over there, like just to say like, yo, okay, like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who did you tell about that decision besides your mom? Did you tell anybody, like friends or?
I mean, my friends at the time just didn't have an idea. I think, you know, when you're in your like early 20s, they're just like, what do you mean you're not going to school? Like, that's so weird, right?
Yeah, that's
like,
what I'm wondering. Like, what was the reaction from just people like, yo, you wildin'?
Yeah, you wildin'. It's like, what are you doing? And I was
Not
like,
only the decision to do that, but even the decision to like, that's a big decision, bro.
yeah, I mean, I don't even think I think of those things. I think of movements like that in your life. Like, you're just sort of like, well, I don't have any other choice now, do I? Right? And I think you have to, like, there is a lot to take an impact. Like, and I realize I do things de golpe. Like, my friends have always said that, like, oh, tú lo haces de golpe. You just go in and you don't even think about it. I'm like, yeah, because if you think too much about it, then you're stuck with this paralysis of choice, right? Because it does sound simple. It sounds easy to just be there, but like, yeah, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I go, like, where do I go from here? Cool, I can always go back. It's not like I already have my credits. It's not the end of the world. Okay, right. If I fail here, fine, right? I didn't necessarily, and I think to me, people are afraid of failure, but like, failure teaches us a lot more better lessons than it is if you're always winning.
Yeah.
You're not as grateful for those opportunities if you always win, right? Because now it's almost like it's earned, like you feel like you earned it. No, not necessarily. Yeah. I think there's so many things that kind of come alignment to that. And so even as we're working, you know, as I left Pratt, that was probably the saddest part though. Leaving Pratt was probably really, really that school. Just I really learned a lot, and I had some really good teachers, and I was the only person of color in that class. So imagine every week, every Friday, we'd post on a board like the work that we done, because we'd meet once a week, but you better damn well have like art that looks like you've been working on this for like longer than an hour or two, and you can kind of tell, you know, art, you can't deceive art. People say you can. No, you can't. You can't deceive it, because you can tell when someone puts in time, and you can see sort of like with figure drawings and stuff like that. So I was up against some strong competition. People who, like, most of these people were international students. A lot of them were international students, and like the people who are here, the locals, are barely like, they're on a whole different level. And I'm coming here just like barely making it. I mean, I remember that my portfolio review. They're like, we see the potential. You just have to tweak this. And I said, okay, cool, let's do it. And I got in, and I was very happy. It was between that and School of Visual Arts, and I chose Pratt just because.
No, that's an amazing school.
Yeah. Like rip, I was like, yeah, this just seems to be like where I want to be, and I know I'm going to be challenged. Boy, was I challenged.
I definitely want to get into that experience at Pratt, and just the experience of overall just like sharing your work, because I think it's a sensitive thing. It's just like something you've created and you're putting out to the world. But before that, the conversation you had with your family, right? I, for so long, just envisioned my grandma going into church and then being like, oh, Pavel, ¿qué está haciendo? And my grandma would be like, oh my God, even if she can't pronounce the name of the company, she'd be like, oh, está haciendo venta de algo. Like, he's selling something, right?
Yeah.
But this idea of being like, oh, he just quit his job and he's doing podcasting. Like,
pero qué y qué eso? ¿Qué es?
Oh, you feel me, right? Like, and it goes back to this idea of like, we just don't want to disappoint our family. We want to give them something to like be proud of, right? So going back to that conversation of that being like a scary moment for you, like, we spoke about the feelings you had when you just made the decision for yourself, but how did it feel to have that conversation with your family?
I mean, it comes down to something I think they also knew too. It's like, you know, we just don't have the money for it, right? Like, I know if they could, they would, right? And unfortunately, it was, and it's this is not that super sensitive to like not speak about, but I think you know, my sister was also going through college too as well, and fortunate from her, she had a ghost sponsor, because otherwise she also wouldn't have gone to college too as well, and so she was able to be sponsored, and my parents only ended up paying maybe like $1,000 or something, but that's still $1,000 that they had to find out, right? There's no way they're gonna give me like $5,000-$6,000 a semester, right? Like that's where's that coming from, you know? And I think, and you know, now looking back in time, I could have squandered, you know, I could have figured out more, but like, I mean, like the workload was like, there was hard, right? I mean, like, you know, you're posting your things, you're working with color theory, you're working with like, you know, like with different artists, you're working with like just really prestigious people, and like, you know, like the school itself is just like, you know, there's legends there, man, and they really force you, and they force you to kind of like get out of that shell and say like, I need you just to do it, right? And I think I've learned that, because another thing that one of my artist teachers, I told him, guy comes in always with like some like Hawaiian shirt. And this is the class. This was my figure drawing class, anatomy class, every Friday from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. I was there all day. We had maybe like an hour break, but we were looking at models, looking at everything, and like it was just very like just raw, like everything from that. But I remember I was you know, obviously I think week 5. The reason why I know all this is because it was such a like a important moment in my life. He was just checking in with everybody. He's like, so like, what do you like about this? Right. I'm like, well, I like art. I like drawing. I used to do animations and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, cool. Like, do you have anything to show like right now? And I'm like, yeah, I have like a few things here. And I showed him. He's like, okay. I'm like, where do you go from there? How do you push in there? All that to say, he was like, like some people come here just to be, like not knowing that they're a consumer. You're either a producer or you're a consumer. Either you produce the work or you just like, or you like to be in the industry because you like it. And I'm like, okay, that's a very solid. At the time I didn't get it, but now I get it, because I think a lot of people, like, they love music. We all love music. Of course we love music, but there are certain people who produce it, and like they know what that is. Either you're a consumer of the product or are you a producer of the product. And so what he was just making sure of, because it's obviously it's a super intensive course, he was like, are you about it or are you not about it? Like, what are you trying to do here? And so like even those conversations, I was like, thank you for humbling me, right? Because even there are moments where I'm like, I don't know if I can be amongst these people, but
So you're a producer, to be clear.
I like to believe, yeah, I like to believe I'm a producer. I like to believe I'm a producer through all this. But that experience with Pratt definitely taught me so much. I mean, even the students I know some of my friends are working in the New Yorker, like these people are still like working hard, and I'm super proud of them. But it's and some have their own creative agencies, and I'm like, Jesus, like I know that they bring you to a good place. But that's not to say that's not my journey. That's not to say I'm there, right? But like, if that's meant to be, then I'll get there. But that's not necessarily what I feel like is my calling, or like where I'm meant to be.
Is that one of the first times that you actually displayed your art to people?
Yeah. And we were talking about that. Yeah, no, every week. It wasn't just like the live drawing classes. It was also our homework afterwards, because it was just everyone's stuff.
That's
and you can tell, you're like, wow, comparatively to everybody else, you don't want to be the wackest one.
But did people tell you were the whack, or did you just tell yourself?
Oh no, I was the wackest one. No, certainly not. No. But there were weeks where I knew one week in particular like wasn't my strongest, and like he made note of that, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like I'll hold that. Like I try to like finesse on that. There was another color theory class where like we were using different like colors, and obviously to like bring something to like recreate classics, like some from like Monet and whatnot. And so I knew that course was also tough too. And she was great. I forgot her name, but I know she was great. I was like, listen, I want you to really be honest with me. Like I know this is trash. And she was like, it's not, but you can certainly do better. I think you weren't trying. And I was like, oh, you're so good at this. Like you're so, I mean, obviously, these teachers are so good at that, and they're so on it. But yeah, a lot about your work is exposing it to other people. It's about being honest with yourself and saying like, this is my best work. This is what I've done this week. Here you go.
Yeah. But I don't know if this happened to you, but I was journaling, and I've always struggled with this idea of labeling myself a creative. And the reason for that, so all right, in this podcast, what I've learned is that authenticity is often us being the version of ourselves that we've been told we couldn't be, right? So growing up, like I don't consider myself an artist, but like I remember those art shows in middle school,
right? Yeah.
Even down to my handwriting. Like my mom would still make fun of me until this day. It was like, thank God people came out with computers so people could understand what you want to say, right? But like, I don't consider myself an artist, but I remember like I can't even draw a smiley face, right? And people make fun of me. So till this day, I'm insecure about like creating anything and putting it out to the world. And it's evolved where like now these days I do like some typography and I put it out to the world. And it's weird that people like validate me and be like, oh my God, that's dope. Like, where can I buy it? Blah. I'm like, wait, what? But this idea of just like putting it out there is a very vulnerable moment that I think a lot of people who are consumers don't realize. But the producer does, because like you said, like you're putting this on display with some of the top people in the world. And there has to be a level of comparison that you do.
Oh, always.
Which is difficult, right?
And that's always going to be something, especially like in the art world, like we have to be something recently that I've also realized too. It's like whether I can draw the dopest character design. I'm like, yo, this is going to sell and people aren't going to like it. But I can draw like a chicken with like a helmet and people go ape for it. Like it's just there's such a level of like art with every form in life is very subjective. I tell you this is good, right? And there is a level of good. Yeah. I think when you compare to, and I'm going to just say like comparative to like what Kanye is looking for, right? Like he's looking for something timeless, right? But that's a whole different conversation of like where design can be timeless. I'm talking about what's contemporary. Contemporary art and what is good, that is all subjective.
Yeah.
When you're looking at pieces and when you're looking at things that are timeless, right? When it comes to like something like of what we wear versus even to art or books, is like, yeah, obviously those are timeless and there's a reason why they're timeless. But I tried very hard. I mean, I'm always going to compare myself not to others, but who I was last year.
When did you get to that point where you stopped comparing to others and start thinking about comparing to yourself?
Honestly, maybe about like a year and a half ago, and I think shouts to video game amateurs, like being in that community brand, just understanding, because it's so easy to I think it's very easy to get caught up in, especially in like in this world where, you know, we had podcasts are like a dime a dozen, right? We have gamings that are dimes. There's so many, like music, entertainment,
Streamers, everything.
content is so like, it's not that saturated. It's just that there's more options. I'd never like to think anything is saturated, because there's good things out there, right? But there are more options. You have to kind of dig deeper. And so with that, dang, I went really, really hard with this one, and then I lost my train of thought.
Well, what happened a year and a half ago that was so impactful that?
Yes. Into comparison to Thief of Joy, I think to myself, like, I look at what other people, I was looking at what other people were doing, not so much like within my brand, within Video Game Amateurs, but also within like just the people that I held high esteem to. I'm just looking at what they were up to, right? And then after a while, I'm just like, well, you know, we're obviously in two different similar spaces, but in different spaces. Why do I feel the need to like see what they're up to when I can always create something that I know what I can do or better, right? Because there's no need for this constant competition. There's always going to be, like, as there's much content, there's also as much opportunities. That's just the truth of it, right? And so when I look back at, like, you know, even for myself, I said, if I'm in the same place I was last year, if I haven't done what I said I was going to do, if I haven't produced what I said I was going to produce, then I've just been consuming all this year, right? I've been just consuming. Haven't been doing anything that has done an impact, not so much on everybody else, but on myself. I need to enjoy this, and whether or not it works for everybody else, that's totally fine. Because obviously, end of the day, I'm just giving you a product, or I'm giving people what I think that's going to work. Whether it be the chicken, or whether it be or the helmet, who knows?
Is that along the time when you launch VGA?
No, we launched VGA in 2018, and when we started it, it was more so like just a streaming platform. We allowed for just like three of the guys. We just didn't have time to all stream together, and so we were like, hey, let's just stream, play Dragon Ball FighterZ. That's what came out. That's kind of what inspired all this, and it was kind of crazy to think now where we had tournaments in Brandon's like the railroad apartment up in Harlem, but then we started to realize like what that need was, and like, hey, let's just bring people together that may not I think gaming at the time was just not cool. I think gaming is still, I think, yeah, right? Like, let's just even start with that. I think gaming at the time and still is not accessible to like what mainstream is. I think no one really is giving it to like the notoriety of what it is. I see gaming as art. I see gaming as an art medium, and I see it how other people are, you know, because it's the same way as like an indie game is very similar as like an indie movie. I think of games very similar to movies. There's still a creative direction, there still is a story, and there's a narrative that people go through. And there's some really fantastic games that kind of sort of convey that. My thing is, how do we challenge my biggest question that I always ask myself is like, how do I challenge the status quo on what is cool and what's not cool? How do I make things cool for the sake of cool? Yeah. And so that's sort of like how Video Game Amateurs kind of like got into like a bigger space, where then now we started implementing gaming for students, right? And so we're working with a curriculum to kind of build that out. We're working with different events, activating different spaces, and something that I think we talked about in previous podcasts. What's so important about activating different spaces? If we weren't able to activate different spaces, we wouldn't know what's around us. Yeah. We get too comfortable with the same thing, right? Yeah. And then I can't challenge myself to produce what's just around me, right? And we want to look at that and sort of broaden the horizon.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into more VGA, but 2018, like you're streaming,
yeah,
and even the idea of streaming, like that wasn't cool for a long time.
No,
a lot more people are into it now, but you also were working full time in 2018, like. Where was your career around then? You don't have to say specific companies, but like, what were you doing?
At the time, so I just finished a coding boot camp. Because funny enough, I went back after leaving Samsung because I fell into the marketing department. I ended up being an instructional designer. I worked with Best Buy. Like essentially, I worked with different brands to like teach, because I wanted to be a trainer. I wanted to be like a global trainer. I wanted to go across the world and kind of like evangelize on Samsung products. I bleed blue. I still bleed blue for Samsung. You know, I love them. And through there, I had such a strong network of like creative agencies that were working in tandem with Samsung, because they did a lot of like third party, like they had third party networks for that. And then I was there. I literally helped build Samsung 837 where it was over there. So I was there for, I mean, I guess like a total of like 4 or 5 years with that team and with like other creative agencies too there as well. And so I've learned so much, not just on just like the experiential retail, right? Like what is retail? Because at the time we were hired to sort of ask that question, like, what is retail going to look like in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and what does the experience look like? How do we sort of mimic to like what Apple was doing at the time? You know, and not to kind of bash them, right? But like, it's also like, you know, Apple knew what they were. They sort of stood their lane. Once they mastered that product, then they move into a bigger part where that fits in the ecosystem, which I think is super brilliant. I mean, obviously we know that, but Samsung was trying to do something better where they were just like, we know our product is good. We don't care whether you buy it or not because our product is still in Apple's like product, right? Yeah. But we wanted to build a store where you don't buy anything, but we want to bring an experience to bring you here and keep coming back. And so obviously they did that with a bunch of events. I mean, we had like 3-4 events every week, showcasing not only like the products, but also bringing like celebrities, bringing like podcasters, bringing all this. And it was so cool because from there I learned like what marketing strategies look like, what building decks look like, what building a story. We're building a story around a product or around the brand, and that's something I could not the level of learning was super surreal there. I mean, I met so many famous celebrities. I met LeBron James there.
That's fire.
Yeah, I mean, like I'll never forget it because we were in the green room. I had to help him with something, and I just like bumped him. I was like, he looked up, he looked down on me, and I looked up, and I was like, huh, and I was like, yeah, huh. And I was like, what's up? And I was like, and it was cool. It's just having that like connection with like with people around us. I think it was like I can't, you know, that's not quantifiable.
So you were in marketing though, but then you decided to kind of like go back to what you were studying before a little bit. You went into the boot camp route.
Data, yeah, because I fell in love with data, and I fell in love with sort of like what is that need of a business, and I think that's where I think for me I can tell a story through data, and then it helps me sort of like figure out what our next step look like because everything, and I think everything can be boiled down to numbers. I think like you'd be surprised. I mean, numbers get you in trouble. I'll never forget this. Numbers will always get you in trouble, but it gives you a forecast of like what things are going to look like and you know like what works and what doesn't. But
you're this interesting mix of like the art and the science.
I have this weird like back and forth. Yeah, it's I'm in constant war with myself because it's like,
why is it a war?
Because it's a leaning of like, am I leaning in too hard into the strategy, or am I not leaning enough into the creativeness of where I'm like, let's see how it unfolds, right? Like, let's see where things are and how can we manifest this into like something bigger, right? Because you can get too stuck on that, but appreciate that.
And you do pivot eventually into, before you get into VGA, you do pivot eventually into big tech.
I fall into big tech, yeah.
Which I think is very interesting because it's so different. And maybe this is a story that I'm making up in my head, but it's so different than an experiential retail experience that is Samsung 837.
Yeah.
Like, let's call it more corporate, if you will.
100%.
And as a Latino, like, I'm imagining many people that look like you in there compared to, actually 837 as well, not many people, but it's just like a bigger team, etc.
There's a bigger team, yeah, and even the people that I worked with weren't necessarily people of color either. So like, there's also that truth too as well. But I think for me, I think getting into big tech and prior to being in big tech, I worked at a nonprofit. I ended up working at a nonprofit for like about a year or so, and really, I was their developer. I was like their web developer. And so that allowed me. So I'll tell you the real truth. I quit my coding boot camp. Because my boy gave me an opportunity. He's like, yo, listen, just come with me. We'll figure things out. And I said, you know what? Best way to learn.
Wait. What was the opportunity? Was the opportunity that good you couldn't pass it up?
Yes, because at the time, so I left Samsung on a whim. I left Samsung and I said, listen, I'm done with this. It was 2018. I was like, listen, I'm done with just working experiential retail. I know kind of what I want to do, and I want to kind of like jump into that direction. What does that look like for an engineering role? Okay. What does that look like? So I did not work for almost 8 months, and I just studied. I relearned coding. I did like JavaScript, Python. I just like kind of like honed in on that, passed the test, and I said, all right, let's do this. And then I think during the third week when they were teaching us like SQL, my boy was like, hey, listen, I'm looking for somebody for database admin. You think you can do it? I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And I just, just up and left, yeah.
That's bold, man.
Another relentless, yeah. Like I was like, I can do it. I can figure this out. I can figure something out. Yeah, I think that was but that was also a leap of faith too, because I'm coming in. I still have to get through an interview process. Right. I still have to figure this out. So to me, I'm like, okay, I know what I've done. I know what I've learned. I built web apps before. I just did it right now. I just have to replicate this and say, here's a vision of what I'm seeing for what you guys are doing. They weren't ready for that, but they're like, we like you. You're still hired. And so like I was there for a year, and I learned so much. I learned so much through like the like through the nonprofit sector and what that entails and stuff like that. And I love the team of people of color. Like everyone's majority of people of color. So like it was just a different environment. Yeah.
So then to go from that to like big tech,
yeah. And
it's like culture shock.
Oh my god. The first day. No, even my interview process was so strange because it was like, yeah, like let's whiteboard. How many ads do you see in a day? Oh, like I can give you like a ballpark number, like 7, because they just want to see how you think of things. Yeah, so I said, yeah, you got 7 ads a second. And by how many ads I see on Facebook, there's three times billion people. Because obviously we've done those coding like gotchas, stuff like that. So, but yeah, first day I was there, they're like, yeah, help yourself. We have sparkling soda here. We have milk. We have this, and it was just the strangest. And let me tell you the strangest thing. Oh my god, it was 2019, like end of 2019. I'd never been to a corporate holiday party in my life, so I'm the only person of color coming in with all these people. And I mean, granted, my team is super solid, but like they were just like all these lines of fashion. People were like in the bathroom doing God knows. I was like, what is going on? I was like, what is going on here? Like, what is going on? I was just like, I was floored, but it was such a sharp turn to see like, yeah, like we don't
like money
money does not matter to these people. Like, everything is expense. Like, hey, like I need you to, like they told me to for the team, because they not an initiation, but they're like, hey, just like find a fun activity to do with the team. I'm like, yo, this is gonna cost $800. Y'all cool? Like, no, we need more. Like, give it 15. I was like, what? Like, I need more. It was such a even the culture of just like they had a cleaning company. Like they're Dominicans, Mexican people like us, and like it just killed me that like they try to put my plate right next to them. I'm like, no, don't worry about it. Like I got it. Like I got it. And I always remember that. I'm like, all these people who have no idea of like pick it up yourselves. Like it's not that deep. And it's just like they're just scrounging for like this office mentality of just like, oh, there's free snacks here. Oh, there's like all these things, and people just come like the first ones in the office to steal the coconut juice, the coconut water. I'm like, this is so weird. We're so like it just feels like a like just the nicest, I guess the nice way to say it is just like people are so spoiled. Like it's just like a weird thing. Entitled. Yeah. And I'm here just like, I'm just happy to be here, know? Right. And I just couldn't shake that off. And and not that it was a bad time being there. It was just more so like I just had difficulty of one manager, not my manager. There was a certain manager, there's obviously no names. Like homie couldn't even figure out my name. Like he was confusing me and the Guyanese guy. We didn't even look the same. There was no similarity on that.
Wait, he would just call you his name?
Yeah, and vice versa. And like after and like in emails, it was like a 4 or 5 month kind of like thing.
That's crazy.
And I was like, what the fuck?
Well, I think the word you said, which is a great word, it's just like weird. It's just different.
Different, yeah.
It's almost like, I feel this way certain times about restaurants. Like there's this restaurant in Riverdale, and I'm forgetting the name, but you walk in there, you feel like you're in Tulum. It's just like you're not in New York. And I feel like that's kind of like what corporate is. Like you walk in, some jobs, you walk in and you're just like, am I in New York? Or it's just like its own world, its own culture, its own set of rules and standards and all these other things.
Right.
It's really, really interesting. Was that a proud moment for you, being accepted into that space?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I have to sit with that. Some moments I'm like, wow, I did it. Like, right, because it went from that, then I ended up going to another similar company, right, because it ended up being like bought out. But then like I had like, and that is a whole different story about even getting there, right? Because some people didn't even believe me. Like homies didn't even believe that I got hired. They're like, show me your email. I'm like, get this out of, yeah, man, yeah. Like not even like I'm already shocked, right? But now I have people who are looking at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, because again, these are the same people who I didn't graduate. Because remember, I didn't graduate. I didn't graduate college. I dropped out of prac. I couldn't afford it. I dropped essentially out of coding academy, my coding boot camp. I had nothing to my name to say like I am worthy of this job. But I'm like, yo, but but I'm good. Like it's not, it's being relentless. It's about like, this is meant for me. This is what I know I can get this. This is not like, I'm not confusing like if and when, like I'm getting this. And so there are moments where I wonder like, yo, all my friends have masters in engineering and they're not even in any of these big tech spaces. They've never been in any of the things. So I'm like, I don't know how I got it, but I got it, you know? But again, you have to, I can't downplay the work that I've done. And I see myself even while talking to you, and even quite often with all the conversations I've had, like I downplay myself a lot because I feel like there's no conventional, like my story is not conventional at all. Yeah. Right. So like, there's no place to be like, how'd you land from here all the way here now? Yeah. And so, but yeah, no, that was a real thing. A lot of people were just looking at me like, what?
Yeah. Well, it's also, and it's such a small thing, right? But even the idea of going back to my grandma in church, my grandma can now say, because Facebook is such a recognizable thing. My grandma could be like, "Oh, he works at Facebook." Oh, yeah. My mom is like, "Oh, I know what Facebook is. Like, I use that." You know what I mean? Like, your family or your friends could be like, "Oh my God, I use this product all the time." You know what I mean? Like, it's everywhere.
Yeah, no, there's
a recognizability to it.
Well, once I was working at Samsung, they were like, "Oh my God, like this is off that they're just like, oh, pero tú and they used to get phones all the time. They used to get phones all the time. My parents were spoiled with phones. They used to give me phones all the time. So they were like, y el nuevo, ¿cuándo viene? I was like, shouts to you, Nancy. Like, shouts to you. But like, but that's the truth, right? And then now, like when I was working at the other company, they were like, "Oh, pero tú y todo esto, y la Xbox," and I was, just to kind of give that. But
did people ask you to like fix their phones? Because I always get the
always. My dad still to this day, he's like, "Yo, arreglame esta." I'm like, "Yo, bro, like I've been graduated. Like I don't even know. I can't even help you. I don't even know there's a Samsung S24." I'm like, "Bro, I'm so behind, man. Like I don't got that."
Bro, I remember I used to do career days while I'd invite like high school students into the office, and there was a few like funny moments. One, speaking of like when you said milk, that triggered me because there was a kid. I was like, yeah, pick whatever you want, and the kids would go crazy, like as crazy as like the people that work there would. The kids were like, oh my God, snacks, blah blah. Yo, one kid got cereal and took the whole carton of milk and put that inside his jacket, and I laughed, but also I'm like, damn, maybe he don't got no milk at home too.
Maybe yeah. Sometimes, and that's a reality. Yeah.
But in the same career day, I remember I did it for like college students as well. And this dude, Instagrams on Facebook, they were like, "Yo, I got this mixtape coming out. Like, what can I do to like make this go viral on the gram?" And I'm like, "Bro,
I can't help."
Like, you just get like random questions like that, or my mom being like, "Yo, I forgot my password. Like, help me."
That's not how this works.
All of it. Yeah, right, I'm like, that's not my job. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I had someone last week like, "Yo, can you help me with this like Instagram password?" I'm like, "Yo, you do know I don't like. I'm not even. I have friends there. I think I can help you there, but I don't. What am I supposed to do? Like, oh yeah, sure, I can call somebody. I'm gonna
Yeah. All right, so that's really interesting. All right, so going back to some of your earlier career days, like what was your first day fit?
Yo, man, I had a plaid shirt. I had like the button up, and once I realized, because it was so weird, because it's the culture too, was like everybody like my manager dressed. She just had it down pat. Shouts to her. She was definitely like super suave on that, but I just came in. I was like, oh, I guess I'll be buttoned up. I had no Patagonia or anything. I was just like, oh, I had a plaid shirt. And after a while, I'm like, okay, everyone kind of just dresses normally. And then I started dressing like me, but like at the time, just like a hoodie, maybe some. And I was like, can I get away with this? Can I start? And that was a whole like. I still didn't feel comfortable doing that.
But why did you dress up like a off-duty police officer? Like, why did
because I had to. Because again, I had no guidance on like, like I had no people like me in that place. And that sucked. And honestly, that's really the reason why. Like, I mean, I think, looking back at it, I think that was one of the main reasons why it was so funny. I didn't make like. Like the friends we look at the ones we look at each other like, oh yeah. I didn't make those friends until maybe 3 months before I left my job, but I still actually speak to them. They're still homies. They're still great. One of them actually also left, but she's awesome. And and we had that moment on Zoom. We're like, you're cool, right? Okay, yeah, we're cool. And so it was just like you find those connections. But man, I mean, that was
why did you wait so long to?
Because there's nobody around. Like the pandemic happened, right? So like I was only really working there for maybe 3-4 months, like in person until we were just fully virtual from 2020 all the way to like the end of my my last day, right? So
that's interesting, man. And you said the word lonely earlier, like that's a lonely experience as well.
Yo, yeah, and I'm usually just like the first to be like, yo, what's up? Let's just have a good time. Let's kind of just vibe and stuff like that. And it wasn't like my team wasn't good. It was just that like y'all don't get it. Y'all don't see it. And that's okay. That's okay, right? I don't think, and there's no shame to them. I think even trying to find like people like oh my god, yeah, the freaking even the Slack. We had a Slack channel for like the Latinos in that company.
Sure.
Bro, it was run by some like Irish woman. Like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do with this? And like, and it was so weird, but it was so funny to like. Cause I think also, funny enough, I actually put on one of my DJ friends for one of their events and their mixers, and I remember she told me like, and it was virtual, it was a virtual like DJ thing, and she was like, yeah, like they were like doing this, like there wasn't like literally like dancing and stuff, and I was like, it was so funny it's just corporate's just weird. I think I say that, right, and I don't think I'm gonna regret anything that I'm gonna say right now. I think we live in like a certain standard of we're chasing. We were told as young kids, or we're gonna chase to get into these top companies, right? But we don't know how long these companies are gonna last. I mean, I got offered a job in Meta, and then the next week, like they laid off everybody, right? Like it doesn't. Like I can tell as people, yeah, I got accepted all these like opportunities and jobs and roles. Yes, granted, I didn't graduate or anything, but like this does not speak to me. This is just a job, and granted, you can learn skills and stuff like that, but I don't necessarily conform into like that the culture of corporate culture.
Yeah, no, but it is a weird place. But also, what you said is powerful too. Like our dream is to get to those big names and get the checks and all that. But I think oftentimes we lose ourselves in the process, right? We code switch, we assimilate. At least a lot of us. Tell me about a time where you think your authenticity was met with some resistance.
Whew. It's so funny. I always think of that of that one place just because I spent so much time there. Yo, it's not authenticity met with resistance, but let me tell you this one story. You know when In the Heights came out?
Sure.
Everyone and their mothers like slacked me as like, oh, like was that filmed by you? I'm like, yo, can you hop off? Like it's not even that deep. And I know they were trying to like, and they're like, oh yeah, you're from the Heights. I love this famous spot. Like everyone tried to like, everyone for some reason wanted to like be like, yeah, I'm down with you. I'm like, yo, bro, like I'm not even that cool. Like I'm just like there's no like. What are you trying to like connect with here? Like, like I like sports. I like other things here. I don't think like just because you like la caridad like means like now we're gonna be best friends. Yeah, like I don't like they were like, oh yeah, Conde, I love it, Conde Steakhouse. I go there all the time with my family. I used to live out there. I'm like, yeah, but you in Jersey with your white husband, so I don't know what to tell you. So
is it more so maybe like you felt like there's so much about you even beyond just being Dominican? Like opportunities to connect, and you felt like it was forced.
Come on, we know that. We know that. Yeah. We know that.
No, it's true. Like you started naming like sports, and you were into art, video games.
Right.
I mean, there's so many things to connect with somebody on, but
they had to choose like, where are you from? Are you Dominican? Oh, I love Dominicans. You can dance. Oh my God, yes. You know what? It was so crazy. Even that holiday party, man. Now you got me riled up here. The holiday party, like there's just like at least two other girls I kind of knew, and they were just like, oh, like, you know how to dance, right? Like, cause you're Latino. And I was like, nah, I ain't doing this. I just started like 2 months ago. I'm not trying to do all this. It was just so weird. It was just like this, like people feel so comfortable to sort of like test your people. Yeah. I think white people are very comfortable to test your Hispanicness or like your color, like, like who you are is like, oh, are you really this Hispanic? Well, come do this or do this. Right, or like, oh my God, like, how do you, I'm like, yo, like, I don't have to explain to you anything. I certainly don't want you to explain to me anything about your life. And I think we can be okay here, right? Like we can all be copacetic without actually having to form to that. Cause that's just, no, like I'm not a spectacle.
Right.
I'm not, yeah, that's how I felt.
I wonder if some of those experiences prohibited you from opening up to your colleagues. Cause you also shared the experience of even people that shared similar cultures. You're like, yo, I didn't even try to get cool with them until like 3 months before I left. So if you wasn't trying to be cool with them, I'm imagining the like mental gymnastics you probably did around like not wanting to just open up when they ask you questions like, how was your weekend? What are you doing? This, like, even during that time, like you were streaming, you were doing so many other things that were like so interesting, so dope, so potentially relatable outside of even your culture, but maybe that was uncomfortable.
Yeah, and my team, my obviously the proximity of my team actually knew, and we're a small team of like 8 people. We're global, right? So like they knew, obviously, they saw that my background every day during the pandemic. They're like, dang, like you got a whole streaming thing going on. I'm like, yeah, it's cool.
Oh, interesting. So you didn't do so even during the pandemic, because I know people that like intentionally decided to look for like the white wall behind them.
This is, I guess, where your original question came from, like with resistance, right? They're like, oh, you got like a lot going on there. I'm like, yeah, so what? Like, what's up? And then they try to make fun of me too. They're like, oh, like, you know, when you're gonna hit like 1 million followers and stuff? And I was like,
oh my god,
yo,
that reminds me of when I launched Plural or Plural, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. I started with like t-shirts, right? And I would get these like little sarcastic comments of like people saying like really cool buzzwords corporately. They're like, oh, put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, right. It was
like I know you don't mean that. You're trying to like sarcastically make fun of the vision and what I'm trying to do. Or like,
of course.
Oh, maybe you should say that on the podcast.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I was like, get the hell out of here. Like, get this. Yeah, sure, because you're stuck here with this job. And I was like, and that's why I hate when like a job becomes your personality. I'm like, please get this out of here.
Oh my god,
get out of here.
But
with
it's
this.
so easy to do that, bro.
Because that's all you've been living for. Because when you feel like your whole entire life is predicated on this one job, this one opportunity, this one role, then yeah, obviously like this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. And unfortunately, whether or not you believe it or not, there's nothing set in stone on life.
Yeah.
Like Meta, Facebook, whatever you want to call it, like they've also lost their people. Microsoft lost their people.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we have AT&T. Like we have all these companies that like are not doing well because obviously of the market. Like, let's be honest with ourselves here. Like, we are replaceable. What happens? Like, we are not the job that we choose. Like we're getting paid with. Right? Do a good job. Of course, I'm not telling you not to do a good job, but also look into yourself and say, like, well, what happens when this job is no longer here? What happens if I'm no longer Ivan at Microsoft.com, right? Like, who I'm still Ivan, right? I'm still the other people.
Okay. When did you get that mindset?
I got that mindset. I had to force myself for that mindset because the hard part, the second hardest, the first hardest conversation I had with my mom was telling her that I had to leave school. Mm-hmm. The second one was that I was leaving Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Because to this day, she still has no idea. She was like, there's like, why? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, Mom, I believe in a vision. I believe in sort of like what I'm doing, and I have a plan. Like I want to believe I have a plan, or I believe like there are things that are aligned with me that allows me to capitalize on this. And if I don't do this now, I'm telling you, like this is just not like I don't know what else.
Yeah.
I do not know what else, and I'm okay with that. Right, because there is no law saying Pavel can't do this. Mm-hmm. There's no law saying Ivan can't do this. The job, this is and I know you know this feeling. Facebook is dope. Meta at the time when I'm sure when you're working was dope, right? And it sucks that you have to come with people and say like, oh, I used to, I worked at Facebook. Oh, now I care. Oh, I worked at Microsoft. Oh, now I worked at AT&T. Oh, now we care. Now we care that I worked there. Oh, like. You don't care about who I am, but you certainly care about what I bring.
Yeah.
So now I have some groundbreaking knowledge that like no one else knows. Like, no, I worked for a job. Like I work for this company. I happen to be hired. Like it's not. We including, and I think the people who do this a lot is obviously the people within our own community. They're just like, so you know what you're talking about. I'm like, no one really knows what they're talking about. So
yeah, I mean, but
there's a lot there. There's a lot there to unpack there.
No, I think that validation is also what gets people to stay as well. I mean, on top of a bunch of other things, but like I always share the story. Like I was at like the T-Mobile store, and they were like, "Oh, let me see if you got an employee discount." Oh my God, where do you work? And I was like, "Oh, TikTok." They were like, "Oh my God, TikTok girl, yo, right?" And think about that validation on like every experience or every interaction where you introduce yourself, right? I mean, I would go on dates and I'd be like, I felt the confidence to be like, I couldn't wait for someone to ask me where I work.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm insecure. Like, I don't want you to ask me where I work. You know what I mean? Actually, or it took me a long time to build the confidence and say certain things about what I'm working on now, but it's a tough decision.
And I feel you on that too. Like when I used to introduce myself, I'd be like, well, not that I said like, oh, I work at Microsoft, but I was like, oh, Microsoft and stuff. Like, oh my God, so cool. Now it's like, oh, like, well, I used to work at Microsoft, and now I'm just like kind of like looking at this direction and what that looks like, and they're like, oh, but that's gonna look cute another 6 months, right? Because that's a whole year, and you're like, well.
Like you feel the need to pre-qualify certain things.
Always, and I think, and especially in like the industries that we are in, right? Like that we're trying to tap into.
But eventually you won't, man. Eventually you'll just be like, this is what I do, and you'll have that confidence that like you'll put that on the same pedestal as we do with the big tech. You know what I mean?
And we have to be unapologetically relentless on that too.
Like that word.
It's like
Yeah.
we have to just like it's
Yeah.
just driving it home, right?
Yeah.
Because no one else, no one else is gonna do it for you, right? Like no one else is gonna tell you like this is because it sounds crazy until it works, right? When my friends when I started VGA,
Sounds crazy until it works.
My friends were like, "What the hell is VGA? So you guys get to stream and chill?" Well, I don't know. We just had we had a bunch of different things. Like we had. Like we had one of the members of Dipset come out, so I don't know. You tell me. I think we're doing a pretty decent job.
That's what going back to you telling people about certain things, like that's what people told you. You're just gonna stream and chill.
Yeah, and I was like, no, that's not what we're doing. But again, and these are, and it's nothing against my friends. Everyone always has an opinion on something.
Yeah, and even if they're joking, like people. Listen, like I like a good roast session. I like
of course,
jokes,
yeah, yo.
But even as funny as they are, even like the slightest and people don't intend to say certain things, they still like that would have hurt me a little bit.
You hold it. You hold it. Yeah, you hold it.
Of
And you're
course.
just like, okay. Like I
Yeah.
see, and it's like, obviously no shit on them. It's also like, okay, that's what they're seeing right now. And that's okay because that vision was not given to you. It was given to me.
Right. And look, I've probably been guilty of that shit too.
100%. You look at people like, what are they doing? I'm a hater.
Like we all just
definitely
just like our parents, we all want to see the best for our friends and etc. Like we're just trying to protect them potentially, right?
Always.
But that doesn't take away from the fact that we internalize all of those comments.
And I think in the end of the day too, and with those internalized comments, you're right. I cannot denounce work because you're still choosing to do this work that's outside of anyone else's scope. Like you're still doing work. You're still doing good. Whether or not it's good in work, that's a whole different story. But you're still doing to do the work. So for I always look at people like, oh, y'all are starting this up. You're good. You guys are doing this. You guys, how many episodes? Okay, that's consistency. Consistency I can work with. With all this thing, I can work with this. And honestly, they have a vision, they have a plan, and they're gonna grow with it. Because what you were a year ago, certainly is what you are a year now, right? And now you have an idea of like what Plural is gonna look like, or even for myself of what my digital analogs, VGA, the backline, all these things that I do is just like there's. These things evolve just like we do, and we have to always evolve with it. So, and that's fine, right? Like what I thought was streaming, what we were just streaming and chill, now turns into like a creative agency for like gaming, and now we're working with brands like Nike, like to let's sort of see that vision of like what that looks like. And it just works now. It just works.
That vision is so important, man. I was just talking to a friend about you. Like he works at Google, and they're doing layoffs as well, and it's kind of forcing him to think about where he can take some of these transferable skills. And I asked him before, what are you passionate about? What are you into, right? And we listed certain things like video games, reading, blah blah blah, right? And right now when he's looking at jobs, he can only he's in ad sales, so he's only looking at other ad sales jobs at other companies because that's as far as he can dream because that's all that he's seen, right? But when I see you and I tell him that you're using video games as a way to educate the world on various skills, like he's never seen that opportunity because he's just never seen somebody do it.
I will tell you this, and that is great to hear.
Like the idea of education in video, like the idea that he can work in the video game industry and it not be ad sales within a video game company, like
it's such a foreign thing for people who just, again, it's like this is your lane.
Yeah.
Fun fact, it's not your lane, right? Like you've worked all this time in life to feel like you just do ad sales, and that's not. I mean, not
right,
but that's not the truth.
Right.
Keep your skills hot. You'll always find a spot.
That's a
Look
bar.
Look inside yourself and look at how, and I've had the conversation with other people as well. Look inside yourself and see what other transferable skills you've had. Yeah. With VGA, I know video editing for sure. I know content creation, production. I'm able to like see a vision and see what a campaign looks like, do a creative, and what does that look like for marketing. I've learned all that through VGA. Through my podcast, I'm able to obviously learn through like OBS, through like all the production side. I can do that. Through my work in from Microsoft and other places, I've now learned. I know ad tech. I know like what those systems look like. I'm building things out through like other different coding languages. Like I'm a quad, like whatever threat that may look like. And what I do implore for like your viewers and even to everybody listening to this, it's like, look inside yourself and see, like, just because the job says this is what you do doesn't mean that's all you do. Right. And then if you give yourself an opportunity to say like, well, what else did I do in this time? Cool. Then let's pivot. Honestly, shoot your shot. Shoot your shot. I like shoot your shot. Look at the role that you want to do and apply for it, because then they're more often than not they're looking for people who can just meet it, and that's kind of like my I think that's my journey right now to become a creative director, and that's where I want to fall into that. Yeah.
What do you mean a creative director?
I want to build. This is my ultimate dream. I want to be a creative director for a soccer company, for a soccer brand. I want to be like consulting for a soccer brand, wherever it be in Europe and here in New York, or wherever. But I really want to see like what the vision looks like and how do we get people to buy into what this encompasses, and what that encompasses, not just like for marketing or for campaign, but also like for clothing. What are the brands around our local that we can also magnify to bring that? What are the events that we can also bring from like local uproot communities and bring in like what other things aside from just soccer? I like soccer, but I don't play that much. I like gaming though, so let's bring that. Let's also bring about like what is that? How do we like, again, it's a director is all about telling a story. We all are storytellers. How do we magnify those who need to be spoken and heard of? I think you're doing a great job of that here right now. And that's sort of like what I want to reflect on for a brand, which is kind of what I'm already doing for VGA, but just now doing it for like for just sports.
I love that, man. And I think all the skills that you're acquiring,
there's a reason.
Like you seem so, a lot of people don't like to, what's your 10-year vision? Like, I feel like you've been thinking about that forever, and you're just like picking up the pieces to eventually get to that spot.
It's a calling. So that's what I tell people. It's like whatever I'm doing, it's only building up to like that, whatever that may look like, but it's giving me all the opportunities, because what I know that I'm going to do only resides with me, but I'm going to see that vision. And that's why for me, like being boxed into like something like that, I'm like, that doesn't work with me. I can't do it.
That's triggering too, man. I remember a manager, like I'm in sales, but I had this like idea to like do this creative event with the client, blah, blah, right? And my manager was like, Pavel, your job is to set up meetings. Go set up meetings.
No, I leave.
It was the most, I love, yeah. It was the most deflating thing that someone's ever told me, because to your point, they try to put me in a box and tell me that I can only do a certain thing, and that drives me crazy. It doesn't allow me to have the autonomy to be able to do that. I know is gonna work. You hired me to do the dope, so it's frustrating, man. But to wrap up, what inspires you to continue being your most authentic self, this relentless version of yourself that you are these days?
I think right now what keeps me inspired is knowing that like I'm now seeing the fruits of my labor come to fruition. I'm seeing a lot of the things that like I've had nights where I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Is this path right for me? And and obviously I'm a believer, so I'm like, yo, Lord, is this really where am I being driven to this point? Is this the path right for me? And if so, like, please, like, help me figure something out. But I'm starting to see like everything sort of like fall into place, and this is all the work, the silent work that I know that you do, the silent work that we all do day to day is now coming to fruition. So I'm just kind of like letting that happen, but still be more intentional of that. My biggest thing, I think my biggest takeaway from this is it's not about me, right? The work that I do is not about me. The work that I do is really like, even for VGA, it's about the children. It's about like having people who are underrepresented to find a haven. What I wish I had when I was growing up is what I'm giving to other kids. And I'll leave you with this. When I was 13 years old, I talked about my animation journey. I was 13 years old, and I was in Mott Hall. It's actually not too far from where we are right now in Wine and Unwind. And there was an Adobe specialist who came into, and I learned so much from him. He taught me how to do animation, and I was already learning how to animate, but he taught me how to make a game. And so we went back and forth on email, and like I talked to him for the next 2-3 years, and then we stopped in contact, because obviously I think that sounds weird to have like a 14-year-old kind of like ask him so many weird questions, right? But turns out, obviously, he is now one of the lead directors in Adobe still. And I shot my shot. I was like, hey, thank you so much. Because of you, I was able to make VGA. And so I always leave with that, like, the impact that you do is never like left there, because you never know who you're going to make an impact. So to me, people first.
Mi gente, that wraps up another episode of the Quién, Eres podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please do us a favor. Like, share, comment wherever you're listening to this episode. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave us a rating and review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you, and see you next time.